you're not alone. Don't go lonely, meaning I think some of us have a bit of a, I'll figure this out on my own mentality and possibly a little worry about exposure. But it would be sad to think you'd have a more painful journey through the second act discovery if you told yourself you had to do it by yourself.
Are you at a crossroads in your career or in life? Well, don't worry, because life's next chapter is waiting. This is the Second Act Success Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Russell. I'm a television producer turned boy mom, turned business owner, podcaster, and career coach. If you are looking to start a new career or begin a fresh chapter in life, then get ready to be inspired with stories of women who have done just that. We will share advice and offer steps you can take to help figure out what your true calling in life really is. It is time to shine, so let's turn the page and get started. Welcome to Second Act Success. Ann Mehl is an executive coach. She is also an author and a TED Talk speaker. I met Ann about 4 years ago when her son began taking classes at my other business, Snapology. I absolutely adore Ann and her family. So when I began this podcast, I knew I wanted to speak with Ann about the work she does as a coach. Not only does Ann have an interesting journey of self-discovery through her own career path, but now she helps others manage their career roles and their life a little bit better. Let's dive into the episode and get some advice from my friend, Ann Mehl. Welcome, Ann. Let's start from the beginning. Where did your story begin, Ann?
School was Boston College for me, and I graduated with a BS degree. Interestingly, I went to school for an accounting degree, and that was because I thought that would be the safest path, really, to pay off my loans, more so than because I felt a calling to accounting. But what I realized probably right in the 11th hour before graduating is that I am not an accountant and that I was going to be misdirected if I went to one of the big accounting firms. So I switched majors to marketing. And then my first job out of school was where I had gotten an offer from the internship I had, Anderson Consulting. It was one of the big consulting shops. I had done this internship and thought, okay, this is a great place to park myself because they've got all the trappings of you can have a long career there, you can jump into other things. So again, it was probably around safety and security. Pays well. They give you a stipend to pay for your suits and reputable name. I started there right after school. I was in the what's called C programming group, so process department, which meant I was coding, even though I was a marketing major. And it felt, again, like ill-fitting suit, kind of, just like the accounting felt. It didn't take me long to realize, I don't think I chose the right position here. Maybe I need to be in change management or human resources. But as it goes, I was slated for that role. They couldn't just switch me into some other group. I decided to leave. And I was only in that job for maybe a month, a couple months, not long at all. They were shocked, but the internship did not resemble what the job was. I was getting the Sunday night blues, like where you're just not feeling great about the week ahead. And I thought, gosh, this is supposed to be honeymoon phase, sort of, with, getting a first job.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't be this heavy. I shouldn't be this worried. There's got to be something else that fits better. But it was scary for me because I was diligent and I wanted to pay those loans off. I was living at home, but I was afraid of quitting and then having this college degree, no plan, and having just egg on my face, like, worked so hard. I called my mom from the lobby of Anderson Consulting in tears, confessing that, like, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I'll get my MBA and I'll like all this achieving notion. She's like, Annie, come home. And it was like, I was afraid to face off to the unknown. That's what I did. I went home and I got the paper out and I figured out, okay, we got to figure this out now.
You were working in Manhattan at that time?
Yes, they had an office in New Jersey, so I'd work out of that, and then sometimes out of New York too. The hardest part of that, I had to write that check back for the suits, and I had already spent it, and it was probably like $1,000, but I was like, ouch, here we go. I was humbled by it and had to figure out, okay, I've got to find a job.
So that led you into your staffing job, is that right?
Yes, and I saw an ad posted, and it said simply this: if you think you're a superstar, call Richard Johnson. And they had the phone number. And I was like, this is sneaky. Bet you this isn't a job. They're just trying to grab your attention. So I called the number to call them out on, you shouldn't do this because we're college kids or whatever my plea was. And he said, you're right. This is a staffing agency. And the truth is we're hiring for the staffing agency. So come in and let's talk. I took a leap of faith, went in, I've got nothing to lose, wore my suit.
Yeah.
And once I landed, I realized, they staff people in tech and finance. It was the dot-com boom of like 1995. I thought this is different here. It still felt a little strange because it was 100% commissioned. So it was a sales job. And I feel like I had sales DNA in me. But I really, truly was like, I've got nothing to lose. So I started in recruiting. And it was a funny place to be post-college because you don't go to school to become a headhunter. But that's what I did. I cut my teeth in that space, making cold calls and trying to figure out who had needs. And then how do I make matches for people to jobs? It was great training ground for a lot of different things, but hard to survive.
You probably learned about so many different industries and different roles and different careers that were even out there that you might not have known about.
You're right. One thing that job does is it gives you a view into the market. You're asking questions all day long to people. You're getting a pulse on where there's an uptick in the market and for what type of person. And you're understanding all different walks of life and people's portfolios. There's a lot of folks out there that are not right aligned, similar to what I felt, which was like, I don't know where I belong, or I'm in the middle of two things. Lots of existential questions that came my way through that role, because as I tried to learn the job, I got to hear where they zigged when they should have zagged, or when they thought about a certain degree, or they're looking to me for advice. I gravitated towards the startup space because it was exciting and people were building businesses off the back of napkins and getting funding for it. And there were new jobs that never existed before. And I found that fun to be a part of building those kinds of companies. Eventually, once I built a reputation, business came my way and it started to make sense. Like, I do this well. I was at recruiting for years, almost 9.5 years, trying to figure out how to build a base and have clients that were mine. I wasn't the top biller, but I had the biggest heart. Mm-hmm. So I was the person who, even though I wasn't paid for it, I invited everybody up to the office to talk to me and tell me their story, because I felt like I could be in their shoes. And when you're in between jobs, or you feel lost, or you're stuck and no one cares, or you don't know where to go with it, that makes it even worse. But if you have a person you can tell it to, or somebody that you trust, like they say, how about we talk on Tuesday? And you have a plan for Tuesday when you're in that abyss of, I don't know what to do. It feels comforting. So I think that was a little glimpse into, I'm not cutthroat enough to stay in headhunting. There's something about this consulting or counseling piece that I'm more built for.
What made you make the leap out of that? Because from there you went to work at Citigroup.
When 9/11 hit, it took down a lot of our big anchor clients. We had to scale back. So it was probably a timing thing of time to go. So that's what the Citigroup opportunity was. I knew someone who was lovely enough to extend an offer to me. And also I thought I want to be behind the desk of like in industry and feel like I could say I understand business from that perspective. So it was odd of a move, but it was to give me a chance at doing what was then institutional sales for the Middle East region for Citigroup Asset Management. So finance, I was probably a terrible fit, to be honest with you, but I said yes, because I was like, let me try this for a bit. It didn't fit on like a glove, but I did learn a lot.
Right. You use some of your experience from college as far as the finance part of it goes. And then you're getting that opportunity to be inside of the corporation, a different angle. So it's a learning experience again.
With a headhunter, you're a bit shallow. You have the business speak, but you know just about this much about all the different companies. So going deep into a business, I felt like I could deeply talk about portfolios and business, but I still wasn't a finance person, which is funny. I almost don't have a left brain. Again, this is like a great example of, you would have thought maybe by realizing accounting isn't my jam, that I would have known what I wanted to be when I grew up sooner. And I was still unsure. So I was plagued by, yet again, a decision here that still doesn't feel like it's wholeheartedly me. So I think it's either one of two things. I'm a questioner and I'm curious and I'm not afraid to look at myself, and or I'm one of those types who didn't know when they were 2 years old that they wanted to be an engineer and then followed that track all the way to the same job forever. I'm just kind of try things out. So I was like, I got to pay attention to this. It's not where I light up. Right. And I have to admit that. to myself. The turn of events there is Legg Mason took over Citigroup Asset Management. And during that acquisition, I was let go. The timing was probably perfect because you start to realize your own truth and you say, I think it's time for me to figure out what's next. I will say recruiting, there was a piece of it that worked for me. So I was trying to isolate, as you say, like lift the cream off the top of what you think you like the most and try to just stay right there. And that stay right there thing was the people aspect of it, the counseling, the cheerleading, kind of being a sparring partner for people. And that's what I started to notice and then try to pursue in the coaching realm.
So you went and got a certification at that time.
I did, by an author whose name is Martha Beck, who had written a book I had read, and I loved her style. She has this thing called Polaris, which was a life coaching certificate. And I was so curious about it. I probably looked at the registration requirements to become a life coach more than once. Finally, I just said, there's a reason you're drawn to this. There's something here. I don't know what it means to be a professional life coach, but go on and try it. So that's what I did is I pursued that certificate. We all met with Martha. It was 20 of us. It was out in Utah, the training. It was a weekend course. And by the time you were done with the 3 days, she blessed you and sent you into the world and said, you are all coaches now. Best of luck. That's the beginnings of my leap of faith into coaching to figure out, okay, how do I do this, build a business around it?
When I think of Martha Beck, I think of Oprah. She's such a big name in this world. So just having a little bit of her that weekend must have been amazing and inspiring.
She's fantastic too, because what she did is she just demystifies that there's this like PhD you need to get to go do great things in the world. And she has 3 degrees from Harvard. So here's a person who basically says, everything you're going to need to know to do this work, I'm going to give to you full stop right now. And we're going to get to it. That's definitely the first time I finally felt like, these are my people. I hadn't felt that with the other jobs. I mean, in college, I sat in on nursing classes. I sat in on School of Education, the master's in social work. I sat in on classes there, kept trying on for size, different things to see, is this me? Is this me? And then with this group, the conversation was around psychology and it was around the helping component. And I was like, there's so many elements of this. I just lap it up. I love it. So yes, you're right. Got back to New York. And then the sober reality is, how do I survive off this as a calling? It wasn't as popular then as it is now. So then I went on a path to figure out how do you build a business around coaching? Because skills are one thing, but actually paying your mortgage is another. So I had to figure out my brand around it. Like, who do I serve? How do I price it? How many people do I need to survive in a year's time? So
in Manhattan,
exactly. I would just talk with everybody I could. I call it the get smart. You had to get out there and do your own marketing to figure out what's the North Star here? Like, what am I trying to achieve in this business? It took me over 3 years to do that. And I say that because sometimes you try things out and people tell you standard quotes like 3 years it'll take you, you'll be good. I remember hitting the 3-year mark and still feeling like I'm not there yet. But it did eventually. I think when you're on your own journey and you're maybe isolated, you could really get down on yourself. So I still had that challenge with building the coaching. Is like, it didn't prove out 100% that it was going to be profitable until I turned a corner and found a way.
I love that you kept on that journey though, that those 3 really long years plus you stayed on it because you could have easily cashed it in and gone back to an office job.
Some other entrepreneurs would probably say this, and I work with a lot of them now, that on any one given day, sometimes you find yourself on LinkedIn going, do I even have a resume? Did I send it for that job? Because it's tough to go it alone and to build your own. And you appreciate that. It's you say, oh boy, maybe the easier route is to just be on somebody else's payroll and disappear into the abyss of the work world. But then you come back to the values, like what's the why? Why did I do this in the first place? And what was the thing I was longing for and I missed? And I would come back to that a lot because I truly wanted more autonomy and freedom. And I really wanted to see the impact firsthand of my work. I was thinking of this too, though, Shannon, because I think about your audience there. The other day I was driving in the car and I was thinking about how I had tried some School of Ed classes like Desire and Children's Learning, and I have my own kids. So I thought, I wonder why I never really pursued teaching. So I share that because it didn't mean I pulled the car over and like applied to a school to become a teacher, but I'm always open to the fact that timing is everything. And you need to make an investment and really try things on for size before you know fully, is it the right thing or not, the right path. I was just noticing that there are probably some elements that in another life or given more time, if I decided to pivot, maybe there's something more to that I never saw in myself, that if I gave myself some research, it could feel as rewarding as the thing I'm doing now. So I leave room there for the questioning. I don't know that I'm ever with so much conviction certain that there's just this one role. I could sound confident that I built this business and I've got this good thing going and I'm very pleased with myself. And at the same time, sometimes I wonder about different paths still, about things you can do that make a difference in the world that might be possible and still out there.
And I think you have all the time in the world to do that, to pivot once again down the road. It's nice to always keep that in the back of your mind if there is something. You are kind of teaching in what you're doing now, in a sense. You're consulting, you're talking with your clients. You're not telling them what to do, but you are that teacher, mentor to them. So it is innate in you.
Yeah, there's the behavioral piece is present, whether it's with adults mostly now. And the same would probably be my leanings towards school, as I'd want to work on kids and behavior in your brain. And so it's probably translates across. But I agree. It's like almost poking at what story am I telling myself? Limiting story. It's not worth it, or I don't have the energy, or what will people say? Do I have an affinity? Why not pursue it? Sometimes when you're in a place of uncertainty or not feeling grounded, you imagine everybody else is there. And I think lots of us question things, even if you've got the setup or the trappings that your stuff.
Right.
So it's like wrong turns, getting in the white water and feeling beat up about like a job that I was terrible at, or like great way to figure out what your passion is like just fumble here, fumble there, and you'll kind of like leave and maybe find a way out. And that'll be the thing that you're doing.
You're right. Every roadblock just leads you to somewhere else. It's just a matter of putting on your mindset to kind of see that and realize it's a good thing. It's an opportunity. Talk to me about working kind of as an executive coach now.
I started as a life coach, meaning I would have people pay me directly to help them with their goal setting. So sometimes they were in transition with a job, meaning they lost their job, they want a new one, or they didn't want to do the career they were doing, but they didn't know how to start with baby steps in terms of launching something. So we had to create, a plan there.
Did you finally feel like this was where you needed to be?
I asked myself this question, what do I want to be when I grow up, one more time? Someone will have to examine my head. I thought I've been wandering and wondering for so long to find a combination of elements of a role that's most me, that, very refreshing. And then I realized I didn't have an extravagant life, but I did have to pay the bills of that condo in New York. I had to have a lot of clients and it was hourly. So I was starting to do the math and realizing this is going to be hard on me. I could burn out if I'm trying to sustain this. So I realized, there's this emerging thing where businesses are retaining coaches to work with their top high potential people. I think that might be better because obviously companies pay more. It doesn't hurt their bank account as much because they call it professional development. So I turned my attention to marketing myself as that person. And I truly was doing the same thing with the people. So instead of saying life coach, I was an executive coach. I will say what helped was I worked in industry. That built some creds because people see Citigroup and they say, okay, you're not just making this up. You know something about the professional world. But my targets became bigger companies. Discovery Channel was my first company, and I was retained by them to work with their executives. And then I continued on that path by just really leveraging the names of some of the companies that hired me to find others. I would get hired by the business to work with a top performer, maybe their CEO, maybe somebody in their executive team. Here's a person to talk to figure your stuff out, to get through the best practices of how to manage your team. And we'll check in to see how it's going. That's where I carved a niche. And then it grew into a lot of high growth, I'll call it VC funded startup companies. You can imagine sometimes those have young management. There's a lot at stake because they have to grow a team and they have to prove results. So they definitely need a support line. And that's where I started to get a lot of phone calls from the investors to introduce me to their founders, or from founders who knew me, worked with me, and shared my name amongst others. So since 2005, That's where I've had a little sweet spot. Companies are acknowledging it as a real thing that people need for themselves as they try to do the thing called work.
Yeah, they're putting money into it in their budgets, and that's wonderful.
It's remarkable that I've been able to own my own business, even through the markets the way they've been, and even through the pandemic. You could easily have been out of a job during the pandemic. Yet this is one of those, because it's working with individuals and we got to just make sure we have a direct line to one another, that I could do it from home. If anything, coaching's even more needed now. If you pull in mental health into the equation and the overwhelm that people feel, there's more and more individuals asking for help. That's meaningful to me, because if I didn't maybe have that feeling, I might feel like, what's next? But there's always room for growth in the work, I think, because I've got to live it to give it. I've got to work on myself in order to show up for people.
Hey, it's Shannon. I just wanted to pop in real quick and let you know about a special freebie that's now available on my website. Think you're ready to start a second act? I created a freebie that will help. It's my second act blueprint with 5 questions that you should ask yourself before you make this massive decision. To check it out, go to secondactsuccess.co to download the second act blueprint for free. Now it's back to the episode. Second act success is all about people who want to transition to something that will be more fulfilling to them, or they might have an idea of trying to get to a new type of career, a new role at the company, whatever it might be, to make them happier. And you've been through it. I've been through it. What tips would you give to someone who is kind of at that point of being ready to leap into something new?
If someone is at the precipice of saying, okay, I don't think the thing I'm doing fits me, I want to do something else, and they're not sure of the something else, I might do an assessment with them as a first start. But sometimes just going back to some strengths helps you get some bearings as to what's most you at this point, or even a work values exercise. That's helpful because our values change over time. And sometimes your top 5 values are different than they were 20 years ago. So let's get those in order without any influence, without any job in front of you. I call it like an excavation kind of phase where you're kind of trying to get some clearing as to like, what is the makeup or the elements or the ingredients? I'll call it like fact finding. How do we get smart on any industry or career? I think you've got to talk to lots of people who are doing that thing. And that may mean lots of coffees, lunches, just conversations. You won't know if that's the company you want to keep if you don't get intimate with what the work requires. So I just think you've got to get real and spend a lot of time getting up close with what's required. We might have chatted about this, but when you're looking at franchises to purchase one, for instance, or partner with one, you've got to top to bottom understand everything from a day in the life to what are the real finances here, what's required for the investment, what am I looking at in terms of my return on this after a year. So I encourage people to you've got to go fishing and you've got to get intel, or we're just walking through a conversation that's based on assumptions. So those might be 2 first things I'd say if they're thinking about doing something different. If you feel shy about enlisting or paying a coach straight away, there's lots of books and exercises online. One is called Design Your Life course. There's lots of ways to do that excavation, fact-finding piece without enlisting a coach. Just like you would say, I'm thinking about running a race and I am on the couch and I don't know where to start with the first mile. When you join a running group, you have more of an oomph to actually show up for the training. The same way with a coach. A coach is going to hold you accountable. It's going to give you things to do homework, and it gives you a bit of a jump start.
I'd love to talk about your TED Talk. I loved listening and watching it. So many nuggets of inspiration. And I just want to hear about that experience being asked to speak. And you were in the Netherlands?
That's right. Yep. It was kind of early days for the Tedx talk. So it's not the big TED stage, but it is a TED talk nonetheless. I loved it because it gave me a voice around some of the things I was already sharing with folks, which were classic learnings for founders and for entrepreneurs. So I backed into sort of my top 10 tips and things I see that get in the way of our best laid plans. I called it Paint Your Masterpiece because I think kind of what we're talking about, which is there isn't ever a really good time. You've got to take your step forward when you think it's your time to do that. I talked about the execution is the key, that if you hold back on an idea because you think someone else has already done it, or perhaps you're too late to the game, at the end of it, the person who gets the funding or the person who gets backed is usually the person who makes inroads quicker. execution is the key, not just the idea. And there's a few other nuggets in there that probably could apply not just to entrepreneurs, but to other business folks. It was great. I mean, I faced my own fears in getting up there and trying to synthesize what my opinion is, what I see as inspirational, and getting beyond fears, really.
What about your book? You're also the author of Painting with Scissors. Tell us all about it.
I started to write what I call a newsletter, which was a monthly piece that I would send to clients. Something like I'd be mulling on after a client session. I feel like a square peg in a round hole in this job. It doesn't feel right aligned to me. Or I want to start this side hustle, this business, and I have fears. What's happening with that? So I would unpack the theme, usually kept it to about 800 words or so. And I decided, after hearing from a few of the readers, you should write a book. And I thought, let me compile this into a book. So it essentially is that. It's the newsletters over time, kind of the best of. Tried to group them according to best practices for interviewing, finding yourself, like getting to the core of why you're stuck. My partner is a writer, Mark, and so thank God for him because he is the editor, and it wouldn't sound as good as it does without him. Yeah, we came together and put it in book form. And I think it's also helping to turn down the volume, that there's like a path that's right. It's lessons learned, but it's really about showing people what I hear behind closed doors so that they don't feel like they're the only ones trying to figure things out. Yeah.
It's a wonderful read to just really bring you back in touch with what's important to you. One of the things that you said, I want to make sure I get it right. If you're not happy with your story, rewrite the story. Kind of saying that you have the power to change what is not working in your life now and to get you unstuck.
I think when we're up close to a pain point, it feels like it's going to devour us whole. So it's hard to look beyond that into the big meta of like what's going on. So sometimes I reference chapters of people's lives to help them see that it's not the everything. And the rewrite your story is, what story are you telling yourself about the situation you're in? And what if you told it in a different way? What if you were free of it? What if you stopped story fondling the negative part of it? Because I think sometimes we replay things so much that we actually enjoy hearing ourselves say it the same way. Kind of breaking down a bit of those ruts to say, what if you rewrote the story? What then? Sometimes if somebody is lost and they want a different future, I might do a letter to yourself exercise, which is getting them to really write the story in present tense 2 years from now. Write it as if you're writing to your best friend, and put in it all the things that you're longing for. It's like it's trying to change again the scope of the narrow view into more of a what if kind of possibilities view.
That's got to be so helpful. As far as entrepreneurs go, there's an analogy that you talked about where you compare entrepreneurs to cars. And I found that to be so interesting, where you say entrepreneurs are always bouncing off the walls with ideas. The trouble is, an idea is not a plan. It's a car without an engine.
Right.
Are you finding that a lot with your clients and the executives that you work with, that there's just so much going on that you have to kind of steer the ship a little bit, make it so that they can focus on what's at hand?
Well, I think we could all fall prey to this sometimes with any endeavor. You want to write a book, or you want to start a business, or you're feverish about opening up a donut shop, whatever your thing is. You get busy with it, meaning you do those things I talked about. You call some folks, you do a bit of research, and then you find yourself on the blogs and you're reading about the competitors and what they're doing, or you find yourself looking at the investors and you get distracted by where you should be or what all the other folks are doing, instead of just doing the traditional one foot in front of the other, like build up the shop. Rather than look across and out and do the comparison game, stick with your knitting. You know, what are the things you need to do to get this going? Get back to your why, especially if you're going to do a second act move that is a total pivot to something else. You've got to really come back to the why, or you're going to psych yourself out the whole way through, because you're going to tell yourself, who am I to be here? Oh my gosh, I was an engineer before. Now I want to be a cop. Or, oh my gosh, I'm not academic. I used to do this other job and now I'm in this PhD program. And wait a minute, there is a reason that I'm doing this. What was that deep why? And hold fast to that. I think a lot of us need that help when you're trying to do brave things in the face of really big headwinds and a short lifespan, trying to make moves there. So I'm trying to dispel the noise a lot for folks, or trying to get them back onto the track that is their own. And you need help sometimes to do that.
Do you feel like right now you're seeing some trends in people searching for jobs or searching for answers through your clients?
With the notions of the world of work that used to be and now are different, all of a sudden we've had years of figuring and juggling. I think people are like, well, Why don't I go to Paris now and move? If not now, when? We don't know this uncertain future. And it's right up in my face, this idea of like, I have no control. They call it, the great resignation for a reason. I think it's been a reflective time for folks to really stare down some deep questions they may not have paused to look at before. It shakes things up. Plus, there's also an unwillingness to play by certain rules of the road of traditional business, which is get in your car and commute 2 hours and do that because we're a big name status company. It's like, maybe I do it a different way and I do just fine. So it's a shakeup for sure. I think people have lost a lot. So there's almost like, I've got nothing to lose. Why not now? Sabbaticals are trendy, and I think there's a reason for them. I think burnout is just everywhere. So what sabbaticals are is different for different businesses, but it's about regrouping and re-energizing and trying to factor that in for what people need for their mental health. There's a whole new wave of doing things, I think. Yeah.
All right, it's time for our 5 fast cues of the week. Here we go. Name one thing that these different chapters in your life have taught you.
Patience with yourself. Go gentle with yourself. That's a big, big part of it. And that's what I hope I bring to people is a pause. Just take a deep breath here.
Number 2, would you recommend taking a leap into a big life change to your best friend?
Really great question. My initial gut is to say it depends. I think it depends on what the leap is. You'd think as a life coach, career coach, I'd be like, absolutely, follow your passion, follow your dreams. I have my feet on the ground too, though. And I think what I'd want is, yes, dream it out. Also, do the work. I'm a big cheerleader for folks, and I'm the last person to say, play it safe. I also believe that there are hours behind people's pivots and change of life. There are hours of research, reading, talking. So I think that has to be in parallel with it.
What is one piece of advice that you would give someone who is trying to start their second act today?
You're not alone. And I would also say, don't go lonely, meaning I think some of us have a bit of I'll figure this out on my own mentality and possibly a little worry about exposure. But it would be sad to think you'd have a more painful journey through the second act discovery if you told yourself you had to do it by yourself. Find help, find support, find someone who can walk the early steps with you.
What does the next chapter look like for you, Ann?
Let's see. I think about the give back piece a lot. As a mom and as a sole breadwinner, I am very much in the business. And so you wouldn't find me, let's say, off hours, running a foundation, volunteering as much as I'd like to. So I think the next phase of like where I give back would be in some ways investing in or volunteering in causes, just like I did with Girls on the Run there when I had a stint and had time for it. Right now, I'm pretty brass tacks. I work very hard and then I try to be present for my family. But I see this like little piece of the mosaic of giving some more life to charity in any way that I can extend myself to others.
Where can our audience connect with you?
My site is my name, so that's probably the best way to either reach out to me directly or to sign up for the newsletter. So it's annmehl.com.
Ann, thank you so much for sharing your story and your advice. It's been so eye-opening to hear your perspective as a coach, and I thank you for taking the time to share your advice with our listeners.
You're welcome. I want to thank you, Shannon, because you are such a special part of my family mosaic in what you do and where you put your attention that I find you really inspiring. I was on the ready for any ask you had today because I love what you're all about. And I give you a virtual pat on the back for starting this podcast. I think it's really great.
Oh, that means so much to me. I appreciate it. And I love your family so much. So thank you. Don't go lonely. Now that is some powerful advice that I am walking away with from this talk today. I agree with Ann wholeheartedly that forging our way through the work world is a struggle, no matter how you look at it. It's a world of self-doubt, self-discovery, and a lot of times it's a world of loneliness. If you think about it, we can take advice from friends and family all day long, but at the end of the day, we are by ourselves on that job interview. It's our name alone on that resume. We leave school with a plan, and man, can that plan change so many times. Ann's story is a great example of listening to your heart, and when it doesn't feel right, make that change and keep going until you find that place that fits you, that place that feels right. I think it's impressive that Ann now gets to help others feel confident in their roles when she was once in their shoes, feeling incredibly unsure. We can all use help. We can all use someone to talk to, whether we are just starting out in our career or we're an executive at the top of a Fortune 500 company. It's important for us to remember that we are not alone. There are people out there to help. If you would like to connect with Ann, go to annmehl.com. Well, that's it for now, but I'm looking forward to chatting on the next episode. Have a wonderful day, my friend. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found some gems of inspiration and some takeaways to help you on your path to second act success. To view show notes from this episode, visit secondactsuccess.co. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Reviews only take a few moments and they really do mean so much. Thank you again for listening. I'm Shannon Russell, and this is Second Act Success.